What becomes even more fascinating is that the story of DNA may extend far beyond chemistry, reaching into a realm where light, information, and consciousness appear to intersect in ways we are only beginning to understand. For decades, most of us were taught to think of DNA as a biological instruction manual, a chemical blueprint stored inside every cell of the body. While that description is accurate, it may be incomplete. Emerging research has opened the door to a much larger conversation, one suggesting that DNA may function not only as a molecular code, but also as a sophisticated communication system, interacting with fields of energy that surround and permeate the human body. When I explore this possibility, I am not asking anyone to abandon science. Quite the opposite. I believe the most exciting discoveries happen when we allow scientific inquiry to investigate questions that once seemed impossible to ask. And one of those questions is remarkably simple. What if our bodies are communicating through light? Scientists have known for years that living organisms emit extremely faint particles of light known as biophotons. These emissions are not visible to the naked eye, yet they can be measured with sensitive instruments. Plants emit them, animals emit them, human beings emit them as well. The remarkable detail is that these light emissions do not appear to be random. In many studies, they display patterns, rhythms, and organization. This suggests that biophotons may serve as a form of communication inside living systems, helping cells coordinate their activities with extraordinary precision. Think about the complexity of the human body for a moment. Trillions of cells are constantly performing countless tasks simultaneously. Repairing tissue, producing energy, fighting infections, processing information, yet somehow these activities remain synchronized. The traditional explanation relies heavily on chemical signals, but chemical communication can be relatively slow. Light, on the other hand, travels almost instantly. This has led some researchers to investigate whether biological systems may use light-based communication alongside chemistry, creating a far more efficient network than previously imagined. If that possibility proves true, it changes how we think about ourselves. Instead of viewing DNA solely as a static genetic library, we may begin to see it as part of a dynamic information field, an interface connecting physical biology with broader energetic processes. The implications are profound because information is the foundation of organization. Wherever information exists, patterns emerge. Wherever patterns emerge, life becomes possible. This perspective invites us to reconsider the relationship between consciousness and biology. Most people think of consciousness as something produced entirely by the brain, yet some researchers propose a different model. They suggest that consciousness may interact with the body in much the same way that information interacts with a receiver. In this view, the brain is not merely generating awareness. It may also be participating in a larger field of intelligence that extends beyond the boundaries of individual cells. Whether this model is ultimately proven or refined, it offers an intriguing framework for understanding experiences that conventional explanations sometimes struggle to fully address. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed tension before anyone spoke a word? Have you ever felt deeply uplifted by another person's presence without knowing exactly why? Most of us have experienced moments like these. We often dismiss them as intuition, yet they may point toward forms of communication operating beneath conscious awareness. Human beings are extraordinarily sensitive organisms. Our nervous systems constantly process information that never reaches the surface of conscious thought. Tiny changes in posture, subtle facial expressions, variations in electromagnetic activity, chemical signals, environmental cues. We are receiving data every second, and much of it shapes our emotional state without us realizing it. Now imagine what becomes possible if our biology is also participating in a complex network of light-based communication. Suddenly, emotions take on a different significance. Emotions are not merely psychological experiences, they are biological events. Every feeling triggers measurable changes throughout the body. Hormones shift, neural pathways activate, heart rhythms change, immune responses adjust, gene expression can even be influenced by prolonged emotional states. This means our inner world is constantly speaking to our physical world. When we live in chronic stress, the body receives one message. When we cultivate appreciation, gratitude, compassion, or purpose, it receives another. Neither state is simply an idea. Both are biological instructions. What fascinates me most is that the body appears to respond not only to external circumstances, but also to the meaning we assign to those circumstances. Two people can encounter the same challenge and experience entirely different biological outcomes because their perceptions differ. One sees danger, the other sees opportunity. One contracts, the other adapts. The event remains identical, yet the body's response changes dramatically. This observation reveals something powerful about human potential. We may not control every event in life, but we possess tremendous influence over the internal environment through which those events are interpreted. Ancient traditions understood this principle in their own language. Modern science is exploring it through neuroscience, epigenetics, psychophysiology, and systems biology. Although the terminology differs, a common theme emerges: the quality of our internal state matters. It matters because biology is listening. Every thought generates electrical activity. Every emotion produces chemical responses. Every perception influences physiological processes. The body is not waiting passively for instructions from the outside world. It is participating in a continuous dialogue between experience, meaning, and adaptation. And if DNA truly interacts with information carried through light, then that dialogue may be far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. The possibility is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it reminds us that we are part of an intricate living system whose complexity exceeds our current understanding. Empowering because it suggests that consciousness is not separate from biology. The way we think, feel, perceive, and respond may be influencing the very systems that shape our health, resilience, and capacity for transformation. When I consider this emerging picture, I begin to see human potential in an entirely different way. Not as something waiting to be acquired, but as something already present, quietly expressing itself through every cell, every signal, every pulse of information moving through the living field we call the body. And perhaps the most important question is not whether that field exists, but how our daily thoughts, emotions, and intentions may be interacting with it in ways that we have scarcely begun to appreciate. The deeper I look into the relationship between consciousness and biology, the more I notice a pattern emerging across multiple fields of study. Researchers often begin with different questions, use different methods, and speak different scientific languages. Yet many arrive at a surprisingly similar observation. Human beings are not isolated mechanical systems. We are dynamic, interconnected networks, constantly exchanging information with our environment. This idea becomes especially interesting when we examine coherence. In physics, coherence describes a state in which waves become synchronized and organized. In biology, coherence can be observed when different systems of the body begin working together in harmony. The heart, brain, nervous system, and immune system all communicate continuously. When these systems are synchronized, efficiency increases, energy is used more effectively, communication becomes clearer, adaptability improves. Most of us have experienced this state without realizing it. Think about a time when you felt completely present. Perhaps you were walking in nature, creating something meaningful, helping another person, or simply sitting quietly in a moment of gratitude. During those experiences, thoughts often become clearer, decisions feel easier, stress seems to loosen its grip. Something within us begins to align. Scientists studying physiological coherence have observed measurable changes during these states. Heart rhythms become more ordered. Stress hormones may decrease. Neural communication can become more efficient. The body appears to enter a mode that supports balance rather than survival. This distinction matters. Much of modern life keeps people locked in survival-oriented states, constant notifications, endless information streams, financial concerns, social pressures, and uncertainty about the future can place the nervous system under continual strain. The body interprets many of these signals as threats, even when no immediate danger exists. When that happens, biological resources are redirected. Energy that could support growth, creativity, learning, and repair becomes focused on protection. The body prepares for emergencies that may never arrive. Over time, this can influence everything from sleep quality to emotional resilience. What fascinates me is that awareness itself may play a significant role in shifting these patterns. The moment we become conscious of our internal state, a new possibility emerges. Instead of reacting automatically, we gain the ability to choose our response. This sounds simple, yet it represents one of the most powerful capacities available to human beings. Every day, countless thoughts move through the mind. Many occur automatically. Many are inherited from past experiences. Some are shaped by cultural conditioning, others arise from fears, expectations, or assumptions we rarely question. But what happens when we pause and observe them? The observer within us creates space. And in that space, new patterns can form. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as highly adaptable. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. Habits become embedded through use. The brain learns from experience and continuously reorganizes itself. This means that our attention is not merely passive. Attention is participatory. Where attention goes, energy tends to follow. Where energy flows repeatedly, patterns strengthen. Over weeks, months, and years, those patterns can shape how we perceive reality itself. Consider two individuals standing beneath the same sky. One notices beauty, possibility, and connection. The other sees only obstacles and limitations. Both are observing the same world, yet their experiences are dramatically different because perception acts like a filter through which reality is interpreted. This does not mean challenges disappear through positive thinking. Life remains complex. Difficulties remain real. What changes is our relationship to those experiences. When perception shifts, physiology often shifts alongside it. Researchers studying placebo responses have repeatedly encountered evidence that expectations influence biological outcomes. The body's chemistry can change based on what the mind believes is happening. Even when a treatment contains no active medical ingredient, measurable physiological responses sometimes occur because the brain generates signals consistent with healing. The placebo effect is often misunderstood. Many people think it proves symptoms are imaginary. In reality, it demonstrates something far more interesting. It reveals that belief can trigger authentic biological changes. That observation alone should inspire curiosity. If expectations can influence physiology in measurable ways, then the relationship between consciousness and the body may be far more interactive than traditional models suggest. This brings us back to the possibility of DNA functioning within a broader information network. Imagine an orchestra. Each musician plays a unique instrument. Yet beautiful music emerges only when all participants respond to the same organizing pattern. The notes remain important, but the intelligence of the performance exists in the coordination between them. The human body may operate in a similar way. Genes provide instructions, cells perform specialized functions, organs carry out essential tasks. But something must coordinate this immense complexity. Information must flow efficiently across countless levels of organization. Light-based communication, electromagnetic signaling, biochemical messaging, neural activity, and conscious awareness may all contribute to this remarkable process. Rather than existing as separate systems, they may represent different expressions of a larger unified network. This perspective encourages a profound shift in how we see ourselves. Instead of viewing the body as a collection of independent parts, we begin to recognize it as an integrated whole. Every thought influences chemistry, every emotion affects physiology, every experience contributes information. Nothing operates in isolation. The implications extend beyond personal health. They influence relationships as well. Human beings continuously affect one another through emotional states. Anyone who has spent time around a calm, centered person understands this intuitively. Their presence alone can change the atmosphere of a room. Likewise, anxiety can spread through groups. Enthusiasm can become contagious. Confidence can inspire action. These effects occur because humans are deeply interconnected social organisms. We communicate not only through words, but through subtle signals that constantly shape collective experience. When viewed from this perspective, personal transformation becomes more than an individual journey. Each person who develops greater emotional balance contributes something valuable to the larger environment. Every act of compassion influences relationships. Every moment of self-awareness affects future choices. Small internal changes can create wider ripple effects than we often realize. This understanding invites a different approach to growth. Instead of forcing change through struggle, we can begin by cultivating coherence. We can learn to align thoughts, emotions, and actions with greater consistency. We can become more aware of the information we consume, the beliefs we reinforce, and the emotional patterns we rehearse each day. Over time, these choices shape the internal environment in which biology operates. And if the body truly participates in an intelligent field of information, one that involves light, communication, and consciousness at levels we are only beginning to explore, then every moment of awareness may be contributing to a process far more extraordinary than conventional models have yet explained. The question then becomes not whether human potential exists, but whether we are willing to recognize the subtle signals through which that potential is already expressing itself, quietly waiting beneath the noise of everyday life, revealing clues about the true relationship between consciousness, biology, and the hidden architecture of the reality we experience every day. What makes this exploration so compelling is that it challenges one of the most deeply rooted assumptions of modern culture, the belief that consciousness is merely a byproduct of physical processes. While this perspective has contributed greatly to scientific progress, an increasing number of researchers are beginning to ask whether the relationship might be more complex. Perhaps consciousness does not simply emerge from biology. Perhaps biology and consciousness participate in a continuous exchange, influencing one another moment by moment. When I reflect on this possibility, I am reminded that every experience we have ever known arrives through awareness. Every sight, sound, emotion, memory, and thought appears within consciousness before it becomes part of our understanding of reality. In that sense, consciousness is not a small detail of human life. It is the foundation of human experience. Yet despite its central role, consciousness remains one of the greatest mysteries in science. Researchers can measure brain activity, they can observe neural networks, they can identify regions associated with perception, memory, and decision-making. But a profound question remains unanswered. How does subjective experience arise? Why does electrical activity inside the brain become the rich inner world we know as awareness? No one has fully solved this puzzle, and it is precisely within that mystery that new possibilities emerge. As we continue investigating the relationship between consciousness and biology, we encounter evidence that the body responds not only to physical stimuli, but also to meaning. Meaning is a fascinating phenomenon. Unlike a chemical molecule, meaning cannot be held in the hand. Unlike a physical object, it has no measurable weight. Yet meaning can dramatically influence human behavior, physiology, and perception. A single piece of information can alter heart rate, hormone levels, emotional states, and decision-making processes within seconds. Think about receiving unexpected good news. Nothing physical changes immediately in the external environment. The room remains the same, the furniture remains the same, the air remains the same. Yet your body changes. Your mood shifts. Your physiology responds. The meaning of the information transforms the experience. This reveals something extraordinary. Human beings do not merely react to reality, we react to our interpretation of reality. And because interpretations can change, our responses can change as well. This principle appears throughout many areas of scientific research. Studies in neuroplasticity demonstrate that repeated mental activity can reshape neural pathways. Research in psychophysiology shows that emotional states influence bodily functions. Investigations into epigenetics suggest that environmental and behavioral factors can affect how genes are expressed. Taken together, these findings point toward an important conclusion. The human organism is highly responsive. It is not fixed. It is adaptive. And adaptation depends on information. The body is constantly asking a fundamental question: what kind of world am I living in? Every experience contributes to the answer. Thoughts provide information. Emotions provide information. Relationships provide information. Environment provides information. The body listens to all of it. If we spend years immersed in fear, the body adapts accordingly. If we cultivate resilience, purpose, and emotional balance, different adaptations may occur. This does not mean life becomes effortless. Challenges remain unavoidable. Loss, uncertainty, disappointment, and change are part of the human journey. However, our internal response to those experiences may influence how effectively we navigate them. That realization shifts the conversation from control to participation. We cannot control everything that happens around us, but we can participate consciously in how we meet those experiences. This distinction may seem subtle, yet it changes everything. Many people spend enormous energy attempting to control external circumstances. They believe peace will arrive once conditions become perfect. But perfection rarely appears. There is always another challenge, another uncertainty, another variable beyond our influence. The search for complete external control often becomes exhausting. Participation offers a different path. Instead of demanding certainty from the world, we develop stability within ourselves. Instead of waiting for ideal conditions, we learn to cultivate coherence amid uncertainty. Instead of reacting automatically, we respond intentionally. Over time, these shifts can create profound changes in the quality of our lives. What interests me most is how these principles relate to the idea of the body as an information field. If DNA interacts with complex streams of biological information, then our internal state becomes more than a psychological experience. It becomes part of the informational environment influencing the system. Every thought carries patterns. Every emotion carries patterns. Every belief carries patterns. And patterns have consequences. Consider how a musician tunes an instrument. A slight adjustment can transform the quality of the sound. The instrument itself remains the same, yet alignment changes the outcome. Human beings may function in a similar way. Small shifts in perception can produce significant changes in experience. A shift from fear to curiosity. A shift from resentment to understanding. A shift from helplessness to responsibility. These changes often begin internally before they become visible externally. And that is where genuine transformation tends to start. Not in dramatic events, not in sudden miracles, but in subtle changes of awareness that gradually reshape behavior, physiology, and perception. The more I examine stories of personal growth, the more I notice this pattern. People often describe a moment when they began seeing themselves differently. Nothing outside changed immediately. Yet something fundamental shifted within. A new possibility appeared. A limiting belief lost its authority. A deeper understanding emerged. From that point forward, choices changed. Actions changed. Results changed. The transformation seemed external, but its roots were internal. This observation aligns with what many scientific disciplines are discovering. Information precedes organization. Organization precedes expression. Expression becomes experience. When viewed through this lens, consciousness may represent far more than passive awareness. It may function as an active participant in shaping how information is interpreted and expressed within the human system. This possibility invites both curiosity and responsibility. Curiosity because there is still so much we do not know. Responsibility because our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs may matter more than we once assumed. Every day we contribute information to the living system that is our body. Every day we influence the quality of our internal environment. Every day we reinforce patterns or create new ones. And if consciousness truly interacts with biology through mechanisms we are only beginning to understand, then the choices we make in our inner world may carry effects extending far beyond what conventional models have traditionally recognized. The emerging picture is not one of limitation, but of possibility. A possibility grounded not in fantasy, but in the growing recognition that life is profoundly interconnected, deeply responsive, and remarkably intelligent. As this understanding continues to evolve, it raises a fascinating question about the future of human potential. Because if awareness, biology, information, and coherence are woven together within a unified system, then perhaps the next great discovery will not involve something hidden in distant space or buried beneath ancient ground, but something much closer, something waiting to be recognized within the untapped capacities already present inside every one of us as we begin to explore the deeper dimensions of what it truly means to be human. At this point, a natural question begins to emerge. If our biology is so responsive to information, perception, and emotional states, why do most people feel disconnected from this potential? Part of the answer may lie in the pace of modern life. We live in an age of unprecedented stimulation. Information arrives continuously. Notifications compete for attention. News cycles move at extraordinary speed. Entertainment fills nearly every quiet moment. As a result, many people spend very little time observing the subtle processes taking place within themselves. The external world becomes louder. The internal world becomes harder to hear. Yet some of the most important biological signals are remarkably quiet. A feeling that something is out of alignment, a subtle sense of inspiration, a moment of clarity that appears unexpectedly, an intuitive insight that arrives before logical analysis can explain it. These experiences often emerge beneath the noise of constant distraction. When attention is scattered, they are easy to overlook. When awareness becomes focused, they become easier to recognize. This is one reason practices involving reflection, mindfulness, contemplation, and intentional self-observation have remained relevant throughout human history. While the methods vary across cultures and eras, the underlying principle is remarkably consistent. Attention changes experience. Where we place our awareness influences what we perceive, and what we perceive influences how we respond. This creates an ongoing feedback loop between consciousness and biology. The more aware we become, the more information we can recognize. The more information we recognize, the more consciously we can choose our responses. The more intentional our responses become, the more our lives begin reflecting those choices. This process does not happen overnight. Transformation is rarely a single event. More often, it resembles the gradual growth of a living system. Small changes accumulate. Tiny adjustments compound. New patterns strengthen through repetition. Eventually, the results become visible. Nature provides countless examples of this principle. A tree does not appear fully grown in a day. An ecosystem does not develop instantly. A river shapes a landscape through consistent movement over time. Life evolves through processes that are often subtle before they become obvious. Human development appears to follow a similar pattern. The most meaningful changes frequently begin beneath the surface. A new perspective, a healthier habit, a different interpretation of a familiar challenge, a decision to respond differently than before. These shifts may seem insignificant in isolation, yet their cumulative effect can be extraordinary. What fascinates me is how modern science increasingly supports the importance of these incremental changes. Researchers studying habit formation have shown that repeated behaviors reshape neural pathways. Studies of learning reveal that consistent practice strengthens connections within the brain. Investigations into adaptation demonstrate that biological systems respond to repeated environmental inputs. The message is clear: repetition matters. What we repeatedly think, feel, and do gradually becomes part of who we are. This understanding introduces an important responsibility. Many people carefully monitor what they eat because they understand that physical nutrition affects the body. Far fewer people consider the informational nutrition they consume each day. Yet information shapes experience. The conversations we engage in, the media we consume, the ideas we reinforce, the emotional environments we inhabit, all of these contribute to the informational landscape, influencing our thoughts, perceptions, and behaviors. If the body is continuously responding to information, then the quality of that information becomes increasingly important. This does not mean avoiding challenges or pretending difficulties do not exist. It means becoming conscious of what we repeatedly expose ourselves to. A mind constantly immersed in fear-based information may begin interpreting reality through that lens. A mind consistently exposed to constructive possibilities may begin recognizing opportunities that previously went unnoticed. The external world remains complex, but the filter through which we perceive it can change dramatically. And perception influences action. Action influences outcomes. Outcomes influence future perceptions. Once again, we find ourselves observing a feedback loop. The remarkable thing about feedback loops is that even small adjustments can alter their long-term direction. A slight course correction in the beginning can lead to a completely different destination over time. This principle applies not only to individuals but also to communities. Human beings are social creatures. We learn from one another. We influence one another. We share ideas, emotions, expectations, and beliefs. Every interaction contributes information to the larger system. When groups become trapped in fear, division often increases. When groups cultivate understanding, cooperation becomes more likely. The emotional and informational climate of a community can influence collective behavior in powerful ways. This is why personal awareness has implications that extend beyond the individual. Every person who develops greater emotional balance contributes something valuable to the people around them. Every act of patience changes an interaction. Every moment of compassion influences a relationship. Every conscious choice creates effects that ripple outward. Often those effects continue far beyond what we can immediately observe. In this sense, human potential is not merely personal, it is relational. The growth of one individual can positively affect countless others. And when enough individuals begin operating from greater awareness, entirely new possibilities emerge within larger systems. This perspective transforms how we think about change. Rather than waiting for transformation to arrive from outside sources, we begin recognizing our role within the process. We become participants rather than spectators, contributors rather than observers, co-creators rather than passive recipients of circumstance. That shift in perspective can be profoundly empowering, not because it guarantees specific outcomes, but because it reminds us that our choices matter, our attention matters, our perceptions matter, our emotional states matter, the information we generate internally matters. If consciousness and biology are truly engaged in an ongoing dialogue, then every moment provides an opportunity to influence the quality of that conversation. Each thought becomes a signal. Each emotion becomes information. Each choice becomes part of a larger pattern. And over time, those patterns shape the trajectory of our lives. The more I reflect on this possibility, the more I see human beings not as isolated biological machines, but as adaptive, intelligent systems capable of extraordinary growth. Systems that learn, systems that evolve, systems that continuously reorganize themselves in response to information. Perhaps this is why the exploration of consciousness remains so compelling. It invites us to look beyond surface appearances. It encourages us to question assumptions that once seemed unquestionable. And it reminds us that some of the most important frontiers may exist not in distant laboratories or unexplored regions of the world, but within the untapped capacities of awareness itself. As researchers continue investigating the mysteries of biophotons, information fields, coherence, perception, and the remarkable adaptability of human biology, we may discover that these seemingly separate pieces are connected through principles that reveal a far more integrated picture of life than we previously imagined. And if that picture continues to unfold in the direction current evidence suggests, then the next stage of understanding may require us to explore an even deeper question, one that asks not only how consciousness influences the body, but whether consciousness itself represents a fundamental aspect of reality, woven into the very fabric from which life, information, energy, and experience emerge in ways that challenge many of our conventional assumptions about existence itself. This is where the conversation begins to move beyond individual biology and toward a much broader perspective. If consciousness is deeply connected to the informational processes that shape life, then understanding consciousness may require us to reconsider how we view reality as a whole. For centuries, science has achieved extraordinary success by studying the components of nature. We learned how cells function by examining their structures. We uncovered the principles of chemistry by analyzing molecules. We explored the universe by investigating stars, planets, and galaxies. This approach has given humanity incredible knowledge. Yet many scientists have also recognized an important limitation. When a system becomes sufficiently complex, understanding the individual parts may not fully explain the behavior of the whole. A single neuron cannot explain consciousness. A single cell cannot explain a living organism. A single musician cannot explain a symphony. Something emerges through interaction. Something appears through relationship. Something arises when separate elements become organized into a coherent system. This principle is known as emergence, and it appears throughout nature. Flocks of birds move as though guided by a shared intelligence. Schools of fish change direction with astonishing coordination. Ecosystems maintain dynamic balance across countless interacting species. In each case, the whole exhibits properties that cannot be understood by studying isolated components alone. The same may be true of human consciousness. Perhaps awareness emerges from relationships occurring across multiple levels of organization simultaneously. Perhaps it involves not only neural activity, but also the dynamic exchange of information throughout the body. Perhaps the distinction between mind and body is less absolute than we once believed. These possibilities remain active areas of investigation, but they point toward an increasingly important realization. Life appears to be fundamentally interconnected. The more deeply researchers explore biological systems, the more evidence they find of communication, coordination, and interdependence. Nothing exists entirely alone. Every cell depends on countless interactions. Every organ relies upon other organs. Every individual exists within larger social, environmental, and informational networks. Connection is not an exception. Connection is the rule. This understanding has profound implications for how we experience ourselves. Many people grow up believing they are separate entities navigating an indifferent universe. While individuality is certainly real, this perspective may overlook an equally important truth. We are participants in systems far larger than ourselves. We influence those systems, and those systems influence us. Even our bodies demonstrate this principle continuously. Trillions of microscopic processes operate without conscious supervision. Cells communicate, adapt, repair, and respond to changing conditions every second. The vast majority of these activities occur automatically, yet they sustain every aspect of our existence. When I reflect on this reality, I am struck by how much intelligence appears to be embedded within life itself. Not necessarily intelligence in the sense of deliberate thought, but intelligence as organization, adaptability, and responsiveness. Life knows how to heal wounds. Life knows how to maintain balance. Life knows how to learn from experience. Life continuously adjusts to changing circumstances. These capacities emerge across countless biological systems, and they suggest that living organisms possess a remarkable ability to process information. If DNA participates in this informational landscape through mechanisms involving light, energy, and communication, then it becomes easier to understand why consciousness researchers are so fascinated by the possibility of deeper connections between awareness and biology. The question is no longer whether information matters. The evidence overwhelmingly suggests that it does. The question becomes how information is organized, transmitted, interpreted, and transformed into experience. This challenge sits at the frontier of multiple scientific disciplines. Neuroscience examines the brain. Physics investigates energy and matter. Biology studies living systems. Information theory explores patterns and communication. Each field contributes valuable insights. Yet the most transformative discoveries often occur where disciplines intersect. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern. Major breakthroughs frequently emerge when previously separate areas of knowledge begin interacting. The boundaries between fields become more permeable. New perspectives emerge. Old assumptions are reevaluated. Unexpected possibilities appear. We may currently be witnessing such a moment in the study of consciousness, not because all the answers have been found, but because the questions themselves are evolving. Researchers are increasingly asking how subjective experience relates to physical processes, how perception influences physiology, how meaning affects biology, how information organizes living systems, and how coherence contributes to health, adaptation, and resilience. These questions invite a more integrated view of human nature. Rather than reducing people to biological machines, this perspective recognizes the complexity of lived experience. Thoughts matter. Emotions matter. Relationships matter. Purpose matters. Attention matters. None of these factors exist independently of biology, yet none can be fully explained by biology alone. They occupy the fascinating space where physical processes and subjective experience meet. And it is within that space that many of the most important aspects of life unfold. Love, creativity, curiosity, compassion, inspiration. These experiences cannot be weighed on a scale or placed under a microscope in their entirety. Their biological correlates can be measured, certainly, but the experience itself remains uniquely personal. This distinction highlights one of the greatest mysteries facing modern science. Objective measurements can describe many aspects of reality. Subjective awareness reveals another dimension entirely. Both perspectives are valuable. Both contribute to understanding. And perhaps the future of consciousness research will depend upon learning how to integrate them more effectively. As we continue exploring these ideas, one theme appears repeatedly. Human potential may be far greater than we commonly assume. Not because people possess supernatural abilities, not because the laws of nature can be ignored, but because the relationship between consciousness, biology, and information appears richer and more dynamic than earlier models suggested. Every year, new discoveries reveal additional layers of complexity within living systems. Processes once thought simple become increasingly sophisticated. Mechanisms once overlooked become significant. Connections once dismissed become worthy of investigation. Science advances by remaining open to evidence, even when that evidence challenges established assumptions. This spirit of inquiry is essential. Curiosity drives discovery. Humility allows learning. And wonder reminds us that there is still much we do not know. When we approach consciousness from this perspective, we begin to see it not merely as a problem to be solved, but as a doorway into deeper understanding. A doorway into the nature of perception, a doorway into the organization of life, a doorway into the informational structures that shape experience, and perhaps most importantly, a doorway into understanding ourselves. Because beneath every scientific model, every theory, and every experiment lies a profoundly human question. What are we? Are we simply collections of biological processes unfolding according to physical laws? Or are we participants in a reality where consciousness plays a more fundamental role than we currently understand? The answer may not arrive all at once. It may emerge gradually through decades of research, observation, and discovery. Yet each new insight brings us closer to understanding how awareness, information, energy, and biology interact within the extraordinary phenomenon we call life. And as that understanding continues to evolve, we may find ourselves standing at the threshold of a new way of seeing reality, one in which the light within every cell is not merely a biological curiosity, but a clue pointing toward an even deeper mystery about the true nature of consciousness and the hidden architecture from which experience itself arises through every thought, every emotion, and every living process unfolding within us. At this stage, it becomes important to pause and ask a practical question. How do these ideas matter in everyday life? It is easy for discussions about photons, information fields, and consciousness to become abstract, but the true value of any insight is revealed in how it changes the way we live. One of the most immediate implications is this: our inner state is not insignificant. The way we think and feel throughout the day is not just background noise. It is part of the informational environment shaping our biology, behavior, and relationships. This does not mean we must maintain constant positivity or suppress difficult emotions. Human experience is naturally diverse. Sadness, anger, fear, and uncertainty are real and valid parts of life. What matters is awareness. When we become conscious of our inner state, we gain the ability to respond rather than react automatically. We can notice a spiral of stress before it fully takes over. We can recognize a limiting belief before it becomes a fixed identity. We can interrupt patterns that no longer serve us. This is where the concept of coherence becomes deeply practical. Coherence is not about perfection, it is about alignment. When our thoughts, emotions, and actions move in the same direction, the body tends to function more efficiently. Energy is no longer pulled into constant internal conflict. Imagine trying to drive a car while pressing the accelerator and brake at the same time. The engine works harder, progress slows, and unnecessary strain builds up. Many people live this way internally. They say they want peace while continually rehearsing fear. They seek connection while protecting themselves with distrust. They desire change while reinforcing old narratives about who they are. Awareness allows us to notice these contradictions, and once we notice them, change becomes possible. A practical starting point is surprisingly simple: paying attention to the quality of our attention. Throughout the day, ask, what am I focusing on right now? What emotional state is this focus creating in my body? Is this state helping me move toward the life I want to create? These questions do not require complicated philosophy. They require honesty. If we repeatedly focus on threats, comparison, resentment, or helplessness, the body adapts to those signals. If we intentionally cultivate gratitude, curiosity, compassion, and purpose, different signals are reinforced. Again, this is not magical thinking. It is the recognition that repeated mental and emotional patterns influence physiology, perception, and behavior over time. Another practical implication involves relationships. Because human beings are deeply interconnected, our emotional states affect others more than we often realize. A calm nervous system can help regulate a stressed conversation. Genuine appreciation can shift the atmosphere of a room. Compassion can interrupt cycles of defensiveness. We are constantly contributing information to the people around us. This means personal growth is not selfish. Developing greater self-awareness improves the quality of our interactions with family, friends, coworkers, and communities. Coherence within one person can create coherence around them. The environment also matters. Our biology responds to the informational landscape we inhabit. Endless exposure to outrage-driven media, constant multitasking, and environments saturated with stress signals can keep the nervous system in a defensive state. Creating moments of stillness, nature, meaningful conversation, creativity, or focused attention gives the body different information to work with. Even small shifts can have cumulative effects. A few minutes of quiet reflection, a walk without a phone, a conversation marked by presence instead of distraction, a deliberate pause before reacting emotionally. These moments may seem minor, yet they gradually reshape the patterns through which we experience life. One of the most powerful practices is learning to observe thoughts without immediately identifying with them. Many people assume that whatever appears in the mind is automatically true, but thoughts are often conditioned responses shaped by past experiences, cultural influences, and habitual patterns. Awareness creates space between the observer and the thought. Instead of saying, I am anxious, we can notice anxiety is present right now. Instead of I always fail, we can observe a familiar fear-based thought is appearing. This subtle shift changes our relationship to inner experience. We stop being completely fused with every mental pattern, and that opens the door to intentional change. Purpose also plays a crucial role. Human beings tend to function differently when they feel connected to something meaningful. Purpose organizes attention, influences emotion, and provides direction during uncertainty. Research consistently shows that people with a strong sense of meaning often demonstrate greater resilience and well-being. Purpose does not need to be grand or dramatic. It can be expressed through service, creativity, learning, relationships, or the way we bring care to ordinary moments. What matters is alignment between our values and our actions. When actions repeatedly violate deeply held values, internal conflict grows. When actions reflect what matters most to us, coherence strengthens. This brings us back to the larger theme running through the entire discussion: information shapes organization. The body is not separate from our lived experience. It is continuously interpreting signals from thoughts, emotions, relationships, environment, and meaning. DNA may be one part of a vast informational network, but our daily choices determine much of the information we repeatedly feed into that system. That realization is both empowering and grounding. Empowering because it reveals that we are not passive spectators in our own lives. Grounding because it reminds us that transformation usually happens through consistent embodied practice rather than dramatic breakthroughs. Real change is often quiet. It is the repeated decision to return attention to the present moment, to breathe before reacting, to question limiting narratives, to cultivate gratitude even in imperfect circumstances, to act in alignment with values, to choose coherence over internal fragmentation. Over time, these choices alter perception, behavior, relationships, and potentially even biological patterns. The emerging science of consciousness does not ask us to abandon reason. It asks us to expand our understanding of what it means to be human. It suggests that awareness, biology, and information may be far more interconnected than we once assumed. And if that is true, then every moment of conscious attention becomes meaningful. Every thought is part of a larger pattern. Every emotion is part of a larger signal. Every choice contributes to the informational field through which our lives unfold. The mystery is still unfolding, much remains unknown, but perhaps the most important insight is already available to us now. We are not disconnected observers drifting through life. We are living participants in a profoundly responsive system, and the quality of our awareness may influence that system in ways we are only beginning to understand as we continue exploring the extraordinary relationship between consciousness, biology, and the luminous intelligence woven through every cell of the human body, and perhaps through every level of reality that gives rise to life itself. The phrase luminous intelligence may sound poetic, yet it points towards something that many scientists quietly acknowledge. Nature consistently displays an astonishing capacity for organization. From the formation of galaxies to the self-repair mechanisms within a single cell, patterns emerge with remarkable precision. The deeper we investigate these patterns, the more we encounter a fundamental question. Where does organization come from? Why does matter arrange itself into increasingly complex structures? Why do biological systems demonstrate such extraordinary adaptability? Why does life appear capable of learning, evolving, and responding to information with such sophistication? Science continues to explore these questions, and while definitive answers remain elusive, one observation stands out clearly. Life is not random chaos. Life contains structure. Life contains order. Life contains information, and information appears to be one of the most powerful forces shaping reality as we know it. Consider what happens when information changes. The physical letters in a book may remain identical, yet a rearrangement of those letters can completely transform the meaning of a sentence. The material stays the same. The information changes. The outcome changes. Something similar may occur throughout nature. The atoms within the human body are not fundamentally different from the atoms found elsewhere in the universe. What makes a living organism unique is not merely the material itself, but the extraordinary way that material is organized. Information creates structure. Structure creates function. Function creates experience. This progression appears again and again across biological systems. When viewed through this lens, DNA becomes even more fascinating. DNA is often described as a genetic code, and that description is accurate. But every code implies information, every information system implies communication, and every communication system implies interpretation. A code has meaning only when it can be read. This raises profound questions about the informational processes operating within living organisms. How is biological information coordinated across trillions of cells? How does the body maintain coherence despite constant change? How does such a vast system preserve stability while remaining flexible enough to adapt? Researchers continue exploring these mysteries, and each new discovery reveals additional layers of complexity. What once appeared simple becomes intricate. What seemed isolated becomes interconnected. What looked mechanical begins to resemble a living network of relationships. This shift in perspective may represent one of the most important developments in modern science. For generations, reductionism dominated scientific thinking. The assumption was that understanding the parts would eventually explain the whole. While this approach produced tremendous advances, it also revealed limitations. Knowing every component of a symphony does not automatically explain the experience of music. Knowing every neuron does not automatically explain consciousness. Knowing every gene does not automatically explain the richness of human experience. The whole often contains qualities that transcend the sum of its parts. This realization has encouraged many researchers to investigate systems rather than isolated components. And when they do, a recurring theme appears. Relationships matter, interactions matter, context matters. The behavior of any system depends not only on its individual parts, but also on the connections between them. Human beings provide a perfect example. Our lives are shaped not only by genetics, but also by relationships, environment, experiences, beliefs, expectations, and choices. Every one of these factors contributes information to the larger system. This means our potential cannot be understood solely by examining isolated biological mechanisms. We must also examine the networks in which those mechanisms operate. The network within the brain, the network within the body, the network between individuals, the network connecting people to their environment, and perhaps even broader informational networks that science is only beginning to investigate. This perspective invites a deeper appreciation for the role of consciousness. Consciousness is often treated as a passive observer, watching reality unfold from a distance. Yet our experience suggests something more dynamic. The moment we direct attention towards something, our experience changes. What we notice expands. What we ignore fades into the background. Attention acts like a spotlight, illuminating certain aspects of reality while leaving others unseen. This simple observation carries profound implications. The world we experience is shaped not only by what exists, but also by what we perceive. Two people can encounter the same situation and emerge with entirely different experiences because their attention focused on different information. One notices possibility. Another notices limitation. One discovers meaning. Another sees only inconvenience. The event remains the same. The experience differs. This demonstrates that consciousness is not merely receiving information. It is actively participating in how information becomes experience. That participation may be one of the most powerful capacities human beings possess. Every day we make countless choices about where attention goes. Some of those choices occur consciously. Many occur automatically. The more aware we become of this process, the greater influence we gain over the quality of our inner experience. This does not mean controlling every thought. Such a goal would be unrealistic. Instead, it means developing the ability to guide attention intentionally, to return focus to what matters, to recognize unhelpful patterns without becoming trapped by them, to cultivate emotional states that support clarity rather than confusion. Over time, these practices influence not only psychological well-being, but also physiological functioning. The body listens continuously. It responds to patterns of attention. It responds to emotional states. It responds to perceived meaning. And because of this responsiveness, small changes can create significant long-term effects. Imagine adjusting the course of an aircraft by a single degree. At first, the difference is almost imperceptible. Hours later, the destination may be hundreds of miles away from the original path. Human development often follows the same principle: tiny shifts in awareness, small improvements in emotional regulation, consistent moments of intentional focus. These adjustments accumulate. Eventually, they transform the trajectory of a life. Perhaps this is why the study of consciousness feels so important. It reminds us that transformation does not always begin with external circumstances. It often begins with perception, with awareness, with the quality of information flowing through the system. As scientific exploration continues, we may discover that many of the boundaries we once assumed existed between mind and body, between information and biology, between consciousness and physical processes, are far more fluid than previously imagined. The emerging evidence increasingly points toward a reality characterized by connection, communication, and dynamic interaction. A reality in which human beings are not separate from the systems around them, but deeply embedded within them. A reality in which awareness itself may play a more significant role than conventional models have traditionally allowed. And if future discoveries continue moving in this direction, they may reveal that the greatest frontier of exploration is not merely the outer world we seek to understand through technology and observation, but the inner landscape of consciousness itself, a frontier containing clues about perception, information, biology, and the remarkable processes through which the universe becomes aware of its own existence through the living experience of human awareness unfolding in real time. When I consider that possibility, I am reminded that every moment of life is, in a sense, an experiment in consciousness. From the instant we wake in the morning until we fall asleep at night, we are continuously interpreting information, assigning meaning, making decisions, and shaping our experience of reality. Most of this process happens automatically. Habits guide attention. Beliefs influence perception. Emotions color interpretation. Memories provide context. Without realizing it, we often view the present through filters created by the past. Yet one of the most remarkable capacities of consciousness is its ability to become aware of those filters. The moment we recognize a pattern, we gain the opportunity to change our relationship with it. This principle appears repeatedly throughout personal growth, neuroscience, psychology, and human development. Awareness precedes transformation. Before a habit changes, it must be noticed. Before a belief evolves, it must be questioned. Before a new possibility emerges, an old limitation must become visible. The simple act of observing ourselves creates space for change. That space is more powerful than many people realize. Within it lies the difference between living on autopilot and living intentionally. Consider how often people describe feeling trapped by circumstances. Sometimes those circumstances are genuinely difficult. Yet in many cases, what creates the strongest sense of limitation is not the situation itself, but the interpretation attached to it. A challenge becomes an identity. A setback becomes a permanent label. A temporary struggle becomes a prediction about the future. Over time, these interpretations can feel so familiar that they appear unquestionable. But consciousness has an extraordinary ability to step back and observe, and observation changes the equation. The moment we see a belief as a belief rather than an absolute fact, new possibilities become available. This is one reason curiosity is so important. Curiosity interrupts certainty. It opens the door to exploration. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me, we begin asking, what can I learn from this experience? Instead of assuming limitation, we investigate possibility. Instead of becoming trapped by a single perspective, we explore alternatives. This shift may seem subtle, yet it transforms the informational environment within which the mind and body operate. Remember, the body is constantly responding to perceived reality. If perception changes, biological responses often change as well. Stress can decrease, creativity can increase, resilience can strengthen, new behaviors can emerge. These effects are not separate from biology. They are expressions of biology responding to information. And information is influenced by awareness. The implications become even more interesting when we consider the role of expectation. Human beings often experience not only the present moment, but also their anticipation of the future. Expectations shape attention. They influence emotional states. They affect how we interpret events. Imagine two people preparing for the same challenge. One expects failure. The other expects growth. Both encounter obstacles. Both experience uncertainty. Yet their responses differ because the information guiding their perception differs. Expectation becomes part of the reality they experience. This does not mean expectations alone determine outcomes. Effort, circumstance, opportunity, and countless other factors matter. But expectations influence how we engage with those factors. They affect persistence. They affect confidence. They affect the willingness to continue when progress seems slow. In this sense, expectations function like internal instructions. The body listens. The mind listens. Behavior follows. This observation helps explain why belief has attracted so much attention from researchers interested in human potential. Belief is not merely an abstract concept. Belief organizes perception. Belief influences action. Belief shapes interpretation. Belief contributes information to the larger system. When enough evidence accumulates around a particular belief, it often becomes part of our identity. And identity is one of the most powerful organizing forces in human behavior. People tend to act in ways consistent with who they believe they are. Someone who sees themselves as capable approaches challenges differently from someone who sees themselves as powerless. Someone who identifies as resilient interprets setbacks differently from someone who identifies as fragile. Identity acts like a lens through which experience is filtered. Yet identities can evolve. That may be one of the most hopeful truths about human beings. We are not static. We are adaptive. The brain changes. The body changes. Perspectives change. Understanding changes. What feels impossible today may become natural tomorrow through learning, experience, and growth. Nature demonstrates this principle continuously. Seeds become trees. Rivers reshape landscapes. Living systems adapt to changing conditions. Transformation is woven into the fabric of life itself. Human development follows the same pattern. Growth often occurs gradually, one insight at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of awareness at a time. Eventually, small changes accumulate into profound shifts. Looking back, people frequently realize that the transformation they sought did not arrive from a single dramatic event. It emerged from countless subtle choices repeated consistently over time. This understanding brings us back to the larger discussion about consciousness in informational fields. If awareness participates in shaping how information is interpreted and expressed within biological systems, then every moment of conscious engagement matters. Every act of attention matters. Every choice of focus matters. Every interpretation matters. Not because reality bends instantly to our desires, but because consciousness influences how we meet reality. And how we meet reality influences what becomes possible. This perspective encourages responsibility without blame. It recognizes that people face genuine challenges while also acknowledging their capacity to participate actively in their own development. It avoids the extremes of helplessness and absolute control. Instead, it highlights partnership. A partnership between awareness and biology, between perception and action, between information and adaptation. The more we understand this partnership, the more effectively we can work with it. Perhaps that is why the study of consciousness continues to captivate scientists, philosophers, and curious individuals alike. It touches every aspect of human life: health, learning, relationships, creativity, purpose, meaning. Each of these domains is influenced by the quality of awareness we bring to experience. And as research continues revealing new connections between information, coherence, biology, and perception, we may discover that many of the capacities we seek are not hidden somewhere outside ourselves. They may already exist within us as natural expressions of a highly adaptive, deeply intelligent system, a system capable of learning from experience, a system capable of reorganizing itself, a system capable of generating insight, resilience, and growth, a system whose full potential remains largely unexplored. And as we continue examining the relationship between consciousness and the informational architecture of life, we arrive at a fascinating possibility that the light emitted by living cells, the patterns encoded within DNA, the activity of the nervous system, and the experience of awareness itself may all represent different expressions of a deeper organizing principle, one that connects information, perception, and life through mechanisms we are only beginning to recognize, and whose implications may ultimately transform our understanding of what it means to be conscious, alive, and profoundly connected to the unfolding mystery of existence in ways that continue to expand our understanding with every new discovery. One of the most intriguing aspects of this exploration is that the deeper we look into life, the less reality resembles the rigid, predictable machine many once imagined. Instead, we find fluidity, adaptability, and constant interaction. Living systems are not passive structures waiting for instructions. They are active participants in a continuous exchange of information. This becomes especially apparent when we study adaptation. Adaptation is one of the defining characteristics of life. Every organism on Earth survives because it can respond to changing conditions. Plants adjust to available light. Animals adapt to environmental pressures. Human beings modify behavior, beliefs, and biological responses in response to experience. The ability to adapt is more than a survival mechanism. It is evidence that life is continuously processing information. Without information, adaptation would be impossible. A living system must recognize changes, interpret signals, and generate responses. In many ways, life itself can be viewed as an ongoing conversation between an organism and its environment. Human beings participate in this conversation every moment of every day. Our senses gather information from the external world. Our emotions provide information about internal states. Our memories offer information from past experiences. Our beliefs influence how incoming information is interpreted. Together, these elements create the reality we experience. What fascinates me is how rarely people recognize the extent of their participation in this process. Many assume they are simply reacting to circumstances, yet perception is never completely passive. The mind is constantly organizing information, selecting what seems important, filtering what appears irrelevant, and constructing a coherent picture of reality. This process happens so automatically that we often mistake the resulting interpretation for objective truth. But interpretation is not reality itself. It is our relationship to reality. And relationships can change. This understanding opens the door to a powerful possibility. If perception influences experience, then expanding awareness may reveal options that previously remained invisible. Think about learning a new skill. At first, what once seemed complex appears overwhelming. The mind struggles to recognize patterns. Progress feels slow. Then something changes. Gradually, new connections form. Patterns become recognizable. Understanding deepens. Abilities emerge that once seemed impossible. The external world has not changed dramatically. The observer has changed. A similar process may occur in many aspects of life. Challenges that once appeared insurmountable may reveal hidden opportunities when viewed through a broader perspective. Problems that seemed permanent may become manageable through new understanding. Limitations that felt absolute may prove more flexible than expected. This does not mean every obstacle disappears. Rather, it means awareness expands the range of possible responses. And the range of possible responses often determines the quality of outcomes. From a biological perspective, flexibility is one of the hallmarks of resilience. Rigid systems tend to break under pressure. Adaptive systems adjust. They reorganize, they learn, they evolve. The human brain demonstrates this principle beautifully. Neuroplasticity research has shown that the brain remains capable of change throughout life. New experiences create new pathways. Repeated behaviors strengthen specific networks. Learning physically reshapes the architecture of the nervous system. This means growth is not merely philosophical. Growth is biological. Every meaningful experience leaves traces within the system. Every lesson learned becomes part of the structure through which future experiences are interpreted. When viewed from this perspective, personal development takes on a deeper significance. It is not simply about acquiring knowledge. It is about transforming the patterns through which information flows. And information flow appears to be one of the central themes connecting consciousness, biology, and adaptation. The body depends upon communication. Cells communicate. Organs communicate. Neural networks communicate. The immune system communicates. Everything depends upon the successful exchange of information. When communication becomes disrupted, problems often emerge. When communication becomes coherent, systems function more effectively. This principle applies psychologically as well. Internal conflict often arises when different parts of our experience are disconnected. One part of us desires growth. Another part fears change. One part seeks connection. Another part protects itself from vulnerability. These competing signals create friction. Awareness helps bring them into dialogue. By observing internal patterns without judgment, we begin integrating aspects of ourselves that previously operated in opposition. This process of integration may be one of the most important dimensions of human development. The goal is not to eliminate complexity. The goal is to create coherence within complexity. A coherent system can contain many parts while functioning as a unified whole. Nature demonstrates this principle continuously. A forest contains countless species, yet operates as an interconnected ecosystem. The human body contains trillions of cells, yet functions as a single organism. Likewise, a mature consciousness can contain diverse thoughts, emotions, and experiences while maintaining inner stability. This stability does not come from control. It comes from alignment. The more aligned we become internally, the less energy is wasted in contradiction. Clarity increases. Decision-making improves. Purpose becomes easier to sustain. This may help explain why individuals who cultivate self-awareness often describe feeling more connected, not only to themselves, but also to life as a whole. Connection naturally emerges when fragmentation decreases. The boundaries between separate experiences begin to reveal deeper relationships. Patterns become visible. Meaning becomes clearer. The world appears less random and more intelligible. Interestingly, many scientific breakthroughs follow a similar path. Researchers often begin with isolated observations. Over time, connections emerge. Seemingly unrelated phenomena reveal underlying principles. A broader picture gradually comes into focus. Consciousness research may currently be moving through such a phase. Fields once considered separate are beginning to overlap. Biology intersects with information theory. Neuroscience intersects with psychology. Physics intersects with questions about observation and reality. Each connection contributes to a richer understanding. And perhaps the most exciting aspect of this process is that it remains unfinished. There is still so much to learn, still so much to discover, still so many questions waiting to be explored. What role does consciousness ultimately play in the organization of experience? How deeply does awareness influence biological systems? What mechanisms connect perception, emotion, and physiology? How does information become meaning? How does meaning become experience? These questions sit at the frontier of modern inquiry. They remind us that knowledge is not a destination, but a journey. Every answer reveals new mysteries. Every discovery opens new possibilities. And every step forward expands our appreciation for the extraordinary complexity of life. Perhaps the greatest lesson emerging from this exploration is not that we have finally solved the mystery of consciousness. We have not. Rather, the lesson is that the mystery may be far deeper, richer, and more beautiful than we once imagined. The human being is not merely a collection of parts. We are living processes, dynamic systems, adaptive networks of information and awareness. And as science continues uncovering the subtle relationships connecting light, biology, perception, and consciousness, we may find ourselves approaching an entirely new understanding of human potential, one that reveals how every experience, every choice, every thought, and every moment of awareness participates in the ongoing creation of the reality we inhabit, shaping both our inner world and our experience of the vast interconnected field of life from which consciousness itself appears to emerge, and to which, in ways both visible and invisible, we remain intimately connected. As this picture continues to unfold, another important realization begins to emerge. Human potential may not be something we need to manufacture from scratch. It may be something we learn to uncover. This distinction changes everything. Many people spend their lives believing they must become someone entirely different in order to live with greater purpose, clarity, or fulfillment. They imagine that transformation requires acquiring something they currently lack. But what if growth is often less about addition and more about revelation? What if many of our greatest capacities already exist beneath layers of conditioning, distraction, fear, and habitual thinking? When I examine stories of profound personal change, I notice a recurring pattern. People frequently describe moments when something became clear rather than something new being created. A hidden strength was recognized. a limiting assumption was released, a deeper level of awareness became accessible. The potential was already there. Awareness simply revealed it. This idea aligns with what we observe throughout nature. A seed contains possibilities that are invisible to the casual observer. Looking at it, one would never guess the complexity that may eventually emerge. Yet, given the proper conditions, an extraordinary transformation unfolds. The potential existed from the beginning. The environment allowed it to express itself. Human beings may function in much the same way. Every experience contributes to the conditions through which our capacities either emerge or remain dormant. Encouragement matters, challenge matters, relationships matter, learning matters. The informational environment surrounding a person influences which potentials are cultivated and which remain unexplored. This perspective invites a more compassionate understanding of human development. People are often evaluated based solely on their current behavior, yet behavior represents only a snapshot in time. Beneath every action lies a complex history of experiences, beliefs, emotions, and environmental influences. The same individual placed in a different context may express entirely different qualities. Confidence can emerge where fear once dominated. Creativity can emerge where self-doubt once prevailed. Resilience can emerge where discouragement once seemed overwhelming. The system responds to information, and information changes. This is one reason hope remains such a powerful force. Hope is not merely optimism. Hope is the recognition that change remains possible. It acknowledges current circumstances without assuming they define the future. In biological terms, hope may represent a form of cognitive flexibility, the ability to perceive possibilities beyond immediate conditions. That flexibility can have profound effects. When people believe improvement is possible, they are more likely to take constructive action. They persist longer. They recover more effectively from setbacks. They remain open to learning. Their behavior begins generating new experiences, which in turn provide new information to the system. A positive feedback loop develops. The opposite can happen as well. When individuals become convinced that change is impossible, options appear to shrink, motivation declines, opportunities go unnoticed, existing patterns reinforce themselves. The difference often begins with perception. Not because perception magically alters reality, but because perception influences engagement with reality, and engagement influences outcomes. This brings us back to one of the central themes running throughout our exploration: awareness shapes experience. The more conscious we become of our perceptions, assumptions, and emotional patterns, the greater influence we gain over how we participate in life. Awareness allows us to step outside automatic responses. It creates room for intentional choice. That room may be one of the most valuable resources available to human beings. Within it lies freedom. Not freedom from circumstances, but freedom in how we respond to them. History provides countless examples of individuals who maintained remarkable clarity and purpose despite facing extraordinary challenges. Their circumstances varied, but a common thread often appears. They refused to allow external conditions to completely determine their inner state. They cultivated meaning. They maintained perspective. They preserved the ability to choose their response. This capacity remains relevant today. Modern life presents different challenges, but the principle remains unchanged. The quality of our awareness influences the quality of our experience, and the quality of our experience influences the trajectory of our lives. What makes this especially fascinating is that the body appears deeply involved in the process. Consciousness is not floating separately from biology. Every perception triggers physiological responses. Every emotion influences bodily systems. Every thought corresponds to patterns of neural activity. The dialogue between mind and body is continuous. Neither operates in isolation. As researchers continue studying this relationship, evidence increasingly suggests that human beings function as integrated systems rather than collections of independent parts. Health influences emotion. Emotion influences health. Beliefs influence behavior. Behavior influences biology. Relationships influence perception. Perception influences relationships. Everything participates in a larger network of interactions. This interconnectedness may explain why seemingly small changes sometimes produce surprisingly large effects. A single new habit, a meaningful conversation, a shift in perspective, a decision to approach life differently, such moments can alter informational patterns throughout the system. Over time, those changes accumulate. Eventually, an entirely different life trajectory may emerge. This is why transformation often appears gradual while it is happening and obvious only in retrospect. The process unfolds one moment at a time, one choice at a time, one insight at a time. The cumulative effect becomes visible only after enough changes have accumulated. Nature demonstrates this principle repeatedly. Mountains are shaped by countless small forces acting over time. Forests develop through continuous cycles of growth. Rivers carve landscapes through persistent movement. Large outcomes often arise from small processes sustained consistently. Human growth appears to follow the same pattern, and perhaps that realization is deeply encouraging. It means meaningful change does not require extraordinary circumstances. It begins with ordinary moments used intentionally, a moment of awareness, a moment of reflection, a moment of gratitude, a moment of courage, a moment of choosing a new response instead of repeating an old pattern. These moments may seem insignificant, yet they represent the building blocks of transformation. The future emerges from them. Identity emerges from them. Experience emerges from them. And if consciousness truly plays an active role in shaping how information is organized within the human system, then every one of these moments carries more significance than we often realize. Perhaps this is why the study of consciousness continues expanding beyond traditional academic boundaries. It is not merely an intellectual pursuit. It touches the deepest questions people ask about their lives. Who am I? What am I capable of becoming? How do thoughts influence experience? How does awareness shape reality? What hidden capacities remain unexplored within the human mind and body? These questions are not only scientific, they are profoundly personal. And as our understanding evolves, we may discover that the answers lie not in choosing between biology and consciousness, matter and information, science and lived experience, but in recognizing that these dimensions may be woven together within a single extraordinary process, a process through which awareness continuously interacts with the living systems of the body, generating the ever-changing experience we call reality while revealing deeper clues about the nature of existence itself and the remarkable intelligence that appears to move through every layer of life.
Deep dive analysis. Let's take this idea of DNA as a photon field and explore it carefully. Not as a proven scientific fact, but as a fascinating possibility that invites us to think differently about ourselves. Most of us were raised to view the body like a machine. We learned that the brain is a computer, the heart is a pump, and DNA is a biological instruction manual. While these descriptions are useful, modern science continues to reveal that living systems are far more dynamic and interconnected than we once imagined. One of the most intriguing discoveries involves biophotons. These are tiny particles of light emitted by living cells. Scientists have detected biophoton emissions in plants, animals, and human beings. The light is extremely weak, far too faint for our eyes to see, but sensitive instruments can measure it. Now imagine a large city at night. From a distance, you see millions of lights glowing. Those lights tell a story. They reveal activity, communication, movement, and organization. In a similar way, some researchers believe biophotons may play a role in how cells communicate with one another. Instead of relying only on chemical signals, living systems may also use light as part of their communication network. Whether future research fully confirms this or not, the idea teaches us something important. Life is not simply matter. Life is organized matter. And organization requires information. Think about a symphony orchestra. The instruments alone do not create beautiful music. What creates harmony is the information guiding each musician. Every player knows when to begin, when to pause, and how to contribute to the whole. Your body operates in a similar way. Trillions of cells work together every second. Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, your immune system protects you, your brain processes information. All of this happens through extraordinary coordination. The deeper lesson here is that intelligence may be woven throughout life itself. Not intelligence in the sense of conscious thinking, but intelligence as organization, adaptation, and responsiveness. Your body knows how to heal a cut. It knows how to fight infection. It knows how to adapt to changing conditions. Most of these processes occur without your conscious involvement. When we recognize this, something interesting happens. We begin to trust the wisdom already present within us. This does not mean ignoring science or medical care. It simply means recognizing that your body is not your enemy. It is constantly working to support and sustain you. Now let's connect this to consciousness. One of the great mysteries in science is understanding how awareness arises. Researchers can measure brain activity, but they still cannot fully explain why electrical signals become the rich inner experience we call consciousness. This mystery invites humility. It reminds us that there is still much we do not know. And sometimes the most valuable approach is not pretending to have all the answers, but remaining open, curious, and willing to learn. Consider a simple example. Two people experience the exact same event. One sees it as a disaster. The other sees it as an opportunity to grow. The event is identical, yet their experiences are completely different. Why? Because meaning influences biology. The body does not respond only to events, it responds to our interpretation of events. Imagine receiving an unexpected message from your employer. Before opening it, your heart rate may increase, your stomach may tighten, stress hormones may rise. Nothing has happened yet. Only your interpretation is affecting your body. This demonstrates a powerful principle. Thoughts are not merely abstract mental experiences. They produce real biological effects. That is why awareness matters so much. The more conscious we become of our thoughts, the more influence we have over our responses. Notice that I said responses, not circumstances. We cannot control everything that happens in life, but we can influence how we meet life's challenges. And that changes everything. Think of awareness like sitting in the driver's seat of a car. Without awareness, habits and emotional reactions often take control. We react automatically. We repeat familiar patterns. We live on autopilot. Awareness allows us to pause, to observe, to choose. That pause may only last a few seconds, but it creates space for transformation. In practical terms, how can we begin applying these ideas? First, develop the habit of observing your thoughts. Several times each day, simply ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? Notice without judgment. You are not trying to suppress thoughts. You are learning to become aware of them. Second, pay attention to your emotional state. Your emotions are valuable sources of information. They reveal how your mind and body are responding to your experiences. Instead of fighting emotions, become curious about them. Ask, what is this emotion trying to teach me? Third, create moments of coherence. Coherence occurs when your thoughts, emotions, and actions align. One simple practice is gratitude. Spend a few minutes each day focusing on something you genuinely appreciate. Do not force it. Find something real. Perhaps it is a loved one, a lesson learned, a beautiful sunrise, a moment of kindness. Genuine appreciation often creates measurable changes in both emotional and physiological states. Fourth, protect your informational environment. Just as your body depends on healthy food, your mind depends on healthy information. Pay attention to what you consume daily. The conversations you engage in, the media you watch, the ideas you repeatedly expose yourself to. All of these influence your perception of reality. Finally, spend time in stillness. Modern life constantly pulls attention outward. Stillness allows attention to move inward. This does not require complicated techniques. Simply sit quietly for a few minutes. Observe your breathing. Notice your thoughts. Listen, many people are surprised by the clarity that emerges when they create space for silence. The deeper message behind all of these ideas is remarkably simple. You are not separate from the processes unfolding within your body. You are participating in them. Every thought contributes information. Every emotion contributes information. Every choice contributes information. Over time, those signals help shape your experience of life. The emerging science of consciousness, biophotons, and mind-body communication may still contain unanswered questions, yet even now, it points toward an inspiring possibility. Human beings are far more interconnected, adaptable, and responsive than we once believed. And perhaps the greatest discovery is not that there is hidden intelligence within ourselves, but that we can learn to work with that intelligence through greater awareness, intentional living, emotional balance, and conscious participation in the unfolding journey of our own lives.